The Japanese Grand Prix is over and Red Bull are back to winning ways as Max Verstappen takes victory and Sergio Perez finishes in second place. But what did we learn from the Grand Prix? Well, in today's video, I'm going to be doing a data analysis from the Japanese Grand Prix. If you enjoyed the video, then please hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. Now, let's get straight into the video. As usual, I'm going to be talking about the top 5 teams later on, which is Aston Martin, Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari and Red Bull, so stick around for that. Yes, the race is over and Verstappen is back to winning ways, but the race was anything but predictable. The race featured by far the most on-track overtaking of the season, and they weren't all in the DRS zone as we saw overtakes in the S-curves, spoon, 130R, and also in the tight hairpin. This altogether meant that there was a lot of on-track action, and alongside all of these overtakes there was also a lot of different strategies, which is typically the case in Suzuka, as we saw a mixture of 2 stops and also a 1 stop. Due to the red flag at the start, there was actually a total of 47 pit stops, with all 3 tyre compounds being used in the race. The majority opted to use 1 set of mediums and 2 hard tyres, but some used soft tyres and some used 2 sets of hard tyres, and some teams only used soft and hards, and with Charles Leclerc, there was only 1 medium and 1 hard tyre used all race, not taking into consideration the one that he did the start of the race on. But we're going to be talking about all of that later on when we talk about Ferrari, so stick around for that. The strategy was chaotic and the number of on-track overtakes helped make the race very exciting, and the fastest lap in the Grand Prix was set by Max Verstappen, and that time was a 1:33.706, and that was set on the 50th lap of the race, showing that there probably was still a little bit more performance to go in the Red Bull. In the midfield today then, what teams looked good and what teams didn't look so good? Well, for me, in the midfield, it was a very disappointing day for Alpine, as they sank like a stone in the Grand Prix, and they were the team that were overtaken the most, especially in the S-bends. I anticipate going into the race that Haas might struggle, but I did not expect Alpine to be as slow as they were. Not only were they slow in the corners, but down the straight they were not particularly fast either. To find out how bad the times were for Alpine for a lot of the race, I've brought up the times of Bottas in the Sauber and both of the Alpine cars, and when you look at these times, it is really poor for Alpine, especially when they're on full fuel. The excess weight and the lack of straight line performance is currently holding them back in a major way. They tried to bring some upgrades for reducing weight, but it does look like they still have a very long way to go. It didn't help, it has to be said, that both Ocon and Gasly did have slight contact at the start of the race as well. Alpine have a lot of work to do and they're on the back foot, but RB had a great race, at least for one of their drivers. Daniel Ricciardo unfortunately didn't make it past the first S-curve on the first lap, as he had contact with Alex Albon, sending them both out of the race and leaving Williams with a chassis to fix for China. But teammate Tsunoda had a great race and secured yet another point for the team in a season where points are very tricky to come by for the midfield. He was somewhat lucky to score points, and you can see that when you compare the times of Stroll to Tsunoda. When you look at these times, you can see that actually things were pretty close between them, and Stroll probably had the edge a little bit when it came to pace, and you would expect that. However, Aston Martin opted to put Stroll on a 3-stop by pitting for an extra set of soft tyres towards the end of the race, and it was this change that killed any hope for Stroll to score any points. But even so, Yuki Tsunoda took full advantage and bagged an important point for RB as they continue to pull away from Haas. I just want to say that if you are enjoying the video so far, then I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. Now though, let's get back to the video and let's talk about the top 5 teams, starting with Aston Martin. For Aston Martin, it was a good result for Fernando Alonso as he was able to score some more points, and for the second race in a row he was using different tactics to normal when fighting George Russell at the end of the race. Fernando was backing off and giving Oscar Piastri DRS in order to defend from George Russell, who was behind on much fresher and faster tyres. And how can we see that Alonso was purposely slowing down to help Piastri? Well, I brought up lap 51, where Piastri was behind Alonso, and lap 53 where Russell had actually gotten past Piastri. And what can we see here? Well, what you can see when you compare these times is it is clear how Alonso was backing off in order to keep Piastri within a second. On the run into Spoon Curve, he backs off very early, and then more importantly, on the run into 130R and to the final chicane, it is clear that Alonso is backing off to give Piastri DRS to defend. As soon as Russell is passed, you can see that his laps get immediately faster. His final lap was 1.3 seconds faster than his laps were when he was using Piastri to block Russell. This was genius driving by Alonso, and really it is the only reason he was able to beat George Russell today. Teammate Stroll had some great overtakes, but once again he missed out on points, which is hurting Aston Martin in the Constructors' Championship. For Mercedes, the strategy in the Grand Prix to me made very little sense, and I think the strategy choice cost them a lot of points. Merc started the race on the medium tyres and then did 2 hard stints after the red flag, which wasn't too bad, but they chose to then stop for another set of mediums and surrendered track position to Fernando Alonso and Oscar Piastri with both cars. And Russell only just got past Piastri, and he was stopped by the Great Wall of Fernando after the final stop, and he couldn't do anything about it. After a somewhat impressive qualifying, it has to be said that the race for them was actually a massive disappointment. They were definitely hard on their tyres, and you can see that when looking at the times of Lewis Hamilton. His pace dropped fairly aggressively and quickly. With the Chinese Grand Prix being next and notoriously difficult on tyres in the past, it is likely going to be a challenging weekend once again for Mercedes, especially with it being a sprint weekend, meaning that they have very limited time to get the setup right. For McLaren, I thought that the Japanese Grand Prix was a really strong race for them, but it is a case of what could have been still. I know some people think they cost Lando potentially a podium by stopping early for the final stop, however I don't think it actually did anything. Ferrari were just too quick this weekend, and well, they're too fast for McLaren right now in general. For Piastri right now, he is still behind when it comes to race pace, and to show that, I brought up the times of Norris and Piastri, and when we see these, we can see once again how Piastri is struggling more with the pace, especially over a stint, and he still tends to lose the tyres a little bit quicker than teammate Lando Norris. This is still a major issue for him that he will need to fix pretty quickly. He's not in his rookie season anymore, so he has had time to get used to the tyres, but it looks like he's still struggling over a stint. For Ferrari, the Japanese Grand Prix was a fantastic recovery drive for Charles Leclerc. His teammate Carlos Sainz scored yet another podium, making it a 100% success rate for podiums in races where Carlos Sainz has taken part. He did it by overtaking Leclerc on track as well. There was some team orders for Leclerc not to hold up Sainz, but I don't think it would have done anything. Leclerc did the one stop in the Grand Prix, and for me, 4th was his maximum finishing position. He did an incredible job with the tyres. And let's now compare the times of the 2 Ferrari drivers so we can see just how well Charles actually did. And when you look at these times, you can see how Leclerc managed the pace incredibly well. Most drivers started to lose their tyres after about 15 laps or so, and you can see that when I looked at the Mercedes and the McLaren drivers' pace, but Leclerc here is able to manage a very stable pace, gradually getting faster and faster as well. Even his teammate Carlos Sainz was struggling to keep with the pace, as well as Charles Leclerc was on the tyres. But it was inevitable that Sainz would come through, because after the last stop, he was lapping roughly a second to a second and a half faster. For Leclerc, he will be gutted that he had a difficult qualifying, because if he qualified towards the front, then I do think he had the pace to beat Carlos Sainz, and he may have even got involved with Sergio Perez. But it instead looks like they're going to have to wait for another race weekend before he gets a chance to actually beat Carlos Sainz on track this year. And finally for Red Bull, it was a simply lovely race, and they scored a 1-2 finish, and let's be honest, was it ever in doubt? This circuit was perfect for them, and they maximised their results. Max Verstappen, for me, probably had a lot more pace in reserve, but he had no reason to unleash it. And you can see that when you compare the times of Verstappen and Perez, especially in the final stint. All of a sudden, towards the end of the race, Verstappen unleashes the pace for one lap, and then goes back to lapping how he was before, which is essentially in cruise mode, matching Sergio Perez's pace. Suzuka was always going to be a dominant weekend for them, but I do think the next race in China is going to be very interesting, and it's going to be interesting to see if they still have this advantage and pace with only having one practice session to get the setup right. So, what did we learn from Suzuka? The RB is easily a top midfield team so far when it comes to car performance. Mercedes need to get on top of their tyre wear woes, otherwise the pain is going to continue for them. Ferrari have the ability now to be significantly more flexible with their strategy than they were last year, as their race pace has massively improved, and Red Bull were untouchable at Suzuka. So, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, as always, comment, leave a like, and subscribe for more F1 content. Thank you all so much for watching.